States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And could we just remain standing for a minute to honor all those who gave their lives? And when I was in school, my favorite subject was history and civics, and when I also taught it was, and my favorite line in this whole book is, "We mutually pledge to each other our lives, our fortunes, and our sacred honor." Thank you.
Motion to approve the consent agenda?
Second. All those in favor? Mr. Rarick?
Yep.
Where'd you go?
Oh, I'll get this one.
The announcer is gone.
Yes, resignation. These are all retirements. Betsy Bierce, Tiverton Middle School, remedial math. Fort Barton, school nurse, Eileen Raposa. Fort Barton Ranger, guidance counselor, Pat Bird, and high school guidance secretary, Madeline Messier.
And I'd just like to thank all these people, the years they put in and the children they helped and served. It's amazing. We're really going to miss them.
And we do miss all our teachers, but for me especially, my particular child at a very important point in his life, Nurse Raposa, was quite instrumental for him.
Definitely.
And everybody has every single one of these teachers, somebody has
That's
a story
right.
like
That's
that.
true. It's very
So
true.
I do thank them all.
And we wish them the best.
Yep.
Okay, thank you. So all those in favor? We did that? Okay. Correspondence, Mr. Rarick, correspondence?
You have just correspondence from the trust. Doug can speak to it a little bit. It's just a seminar on OPEB.
I put a advertisement for a trust seminar regarding OPEB. The trust is starting a OPEB trust for members that are interested in contributing and starting a trust fund for their future liabilities related to post-employment benefits. So school committee members are invited. Under who should attend, you see a list of all the folks they think may be appropriate. So just give either me or the trust a call if you're interested in attending. It's Thursday, June 4th from 8:30 to 10:30 a.m.
And OPEB is?
Other post-employment benefits. Predominantly health insurance.
Health insurance.
It's a huge number. Mr. Rarick, the park?
Yeah, the second is a letter from Rick Richards asking districts to stick to the 2020 implementation date for using park as a graduation requirement.
And I would imagine we'll have a discussion and an item on that in the fall.
When it's time to, yeah,
Okay, thank you.
yes, we will.
Make a motion to move up item 6B.
Second.
All those in favor? Okay. So we're going to move that up? No. 6B, it's discussion of a Ranger School fourth grade gift.
Hi, my name is Sarah Farley. I am representing Ranger School tonight. I'm here to try to get approval for an idea that we have for our fourth graders' gift to Ranger School. Some of you may remember well. We were here about 2 years ago requesting that we find a new home for the tiger cubs that used to be above the door to the old Ranger School. After a lot of work on a lot of different people's part, it is now out in front of the new Ranger School. On the back of it are the handprints of all of the fourth graders with their names signed that you can see from the inside of the school. So the picture on the first picture that we had up, probably most of you know it as the Walk Through Tiverton. It's a mural that Mika Siga did when she was an artist in residence in like 1997. It consisted, I just found a little write-up on it. It said it's 600 pounds of clay went into making the mural. It was made by the students and the teachers and their family members came in to help. Each grade studied a different era of Tiverton's history, and then with Mika's help, they created scenes that represented what was going on in Tiverton during that time period. Once it was up on the wall, The kids had imprints of their feet made, so there were footsteps connecting all the different scenes on the wall of the cafeteria at the old Ranger School. So this was the industrial period. This was Native American also. We decided this was Fort Barton, right? Was this the Fort Colonial? When Ranger moved to its new building, they tried to remove what they could. There was some damage to mainly the outsides of the mural. It's all on big big pieces of plywood, and we probably have about 9 different sections, maybe about that. So you still get, the pictures were taken after the fact. We just took those a couple of months ago. So they're still in great shape, although there still needs to be some work. When Mika came to look at the new tigers out front, she had offered to help us repair if we ever kind of wanted to take that project on. So we started thinking about it, and Mike Zimick from Stonebridge Associates and Rod Poland from Poland Construction came to kind of look at what we had for area in the school. We ended up putting this on the back burner for a while because it looked like we were going to need to create a whole new wall to support the weight of the pieces themselves. So it was recommended that we would construct a new metal stud wall with fire-treated plywood covered with Type X gypsum. This wall would be secured right to the wall that's in place right now. We should be able to match it up so you wouldn't even notice that it was different. It still falls within the same lights. Electrical, we don't need to change anything there. Rod Poland has a son who's in 4th grade. He estimated our cost of materials to be about $1,200, and he would donate his time for framing the wall. These are blueprints that Mike Zimick had put together, and that's what Rod had used to work off of for creating the budget. We went through and we didn't actually know for sure if it was going to end up fitting in the area. So we sort of measured everything out, traced all of the pieces that we had, and we should have plenty of room to fit it up on that wall. The budget for it, we had written a grant back in December 2013 that we have $500 for. The PTO has earmarked $500. We have a donation of $250. And then also we'll have some 4th grade farewell funds that if this is part of their gift, then we can use that. I think we have enough to create the wall itself. We have Rod, who is willing to donate his time to do it. I think our hope was that we could get the wall up, and even if it's get one piece of the mural up. And we have a kiln in Ranger that hasn't really been used, so we're hoping that maybe we can make the 4th graders' footprints and be able to use that to connect the pieces of the mural once we finally get them all up. And then this is probably the biggest of the pieces that are still there, and those are
The Seven Church Brothers and their sister.
Oh,
so.
that's nice, huh?
We would like the project itself wouldn't happen until summertime, but now we have to figure out, because I hear Ranger's going to be a pretty busy place this summer too. But it would happen when school wasn't in session. But we would like to know if we could go ahead with it, just because if it's not going to be a possibility, then we have to kind of think of other options.
I don't see why not, as, as long as it passes the building code, and it doesn't impact the fire code, because it is a hallway, it's a main egress. I don't have a concern about it, as long as it meets all the town standards.
Will someone be working with like the fire marshal and the, okay.
Yeah,
We want to get your approval before we brought
brought it up.
Yeah,
I
I
don't
don't-
even know, to be honest with you, if it require a permit, because
Yeah.
it's not address, doesn't change any kind
Right,
of
right.
exiting or egress. And the description that she gave of the construction fits in with the building construction type. So it's all non-combustible materials, hence the metal stuff.
Yeah, I don't,
fire treated
I
plastic.
think it's a good idea. I don't
Yeah,
see an
I
issue
do
with
too.
it.
Very
I'm very
excited
excited
to see it.
about it. That's fabulous, because they have the one in Pecasset, and this will be wonderful.
Yeah, because I heard that, I think the other schools have at
beautiful.
least portions of them
Yeah.
in place
I
still.
will make a motion to approve.
Second.
Okay. Great.
Any other questions?
Oh, I thank you for taking
Yes,
on
very
this
much.
job. It's a wonderful link, not only
Oh,
with
it is.
Tiverton's long ago past, but with our past of 20 years ago, approximately when this was all put together. And it would be a shame to see
Oh, it would be.
spend another 20 years in a boiler room.
Yes,
And
yeah.
thank you to Mike and
Everybody that
Yeah.
did it.
Rod.
Appreciate it. Okay,
Yes.
well,
And I have to say, I think the teachers and everybody who knew the Tiger Cubs in their past home have really appreciated them kind of being out in front of the school and on display again. So, thank you.
Thank
all right,
you.
all those in favor? Okay, thank you very much,
Thank you,
everybody.
Sarah.
Okay. Discussion possible vote the budget, 2015-16 budget.
Just going to wait for the PowerPoint to queue up
so
here.
that's this.
That's what you have in front of you. As Al's getting it set up, as we know, every year, sometimes we have positive news to report at this time of year, like last year, where we had positive information regarding our insurance costs, our health insurance costs. This year, as we talked about at our last meeting, and as we've talked about in opens, at the FTR hearing, and then when we were on television leading up to the FTR vote, we talked about our concerns regarding some items that were going to negatively impact our budget. And of course, at the FTR, the voters also voted and didn't support Budget 1 and supported Budget 2, which also reduced our budget. So what Doug and I sat down to do was create the PowerPoint here to explain to everybody what the impact of those costs are for health insurance and some of the other issues, and our recommendations, and also looking forward, how will it impact us in FY17. Voters appropriated in the last FDR $29,455,785. We requested $29,582,126. FY16, we've identified, which we've talked about, and we're going to break them down in the next couple of slides, of $423,238. When you then add the shortfall with the voters picking Budget 2, our shortfall goes to $549,579. So in order to balance, we need to come up with those funds. What's causing the $423,238, or how do we get here? Our health insurance, which we originally put in the budget 8%, came in at 13.3%. That creates a $147,613 deficit for us. Our school lunch projections came in the red, and we're looking at almost $40,000 in our school lunch program of $39,729. Transportation is really where we took a major hit financially in our projections, coming in at $235,902 over budget. It came in at 17%, and we have that on our agenda to talk about later, where we originally had a 2.5% escalator in the budget. Now, how do we offset that? We're proposing to use a one-time credit, which the committee voted on last year at this time, of $144,852 to use those funds. For last month, we talked about it. I'm sorry. And $189,991, which would be not to implement full-day K this year and try again in FY17. Also, we put postpone, eliminate, but it's really eliminate in order to make all these work. The remedial math increase position at Fort Barton, the elementary teaching assistant for the library, which was part of our digital literacy initiative, would have to be eliminated, and as well as virtual high school, at the high school, for next year at the high school to offer to our students. We've also accounted for our teacher retirements, so we would save $62,305 there. If the committee approves those recommendations, we're still looking at $78,267, which Doug and I believe we can accrue over the course of the year, either with using some of our small surplus at the end of this year or through a budget freeze, earlier in the school year than we've done in the past. But that's where we are regarding FYI 16.
Just for a quick
Yep,
one, can we have
sure.
ask a couple questions?
Sure.
about this? So, can you go back a couple
Sure.
slides? So on the, maybe one more slide.
Sure.
Just about the transportation
Yep.
cost. Can you remind me exactly when we were made aware of that?
We found out officially, we made it known to the committee a week ago.
That Friday meeting.
So
A
was
week
that
ago Friday,
The
yes,
Friday
a week
meeting.
ago
So it's
Friday.
literally the day
So it was
before.
very late because the bids,
Well, we had to go to bid.
right, we went
Yeah.
out to bid and the bids
We didn't
came
compile the
in.
bids until April, so I mean, this is all information that happened subsequent to us putting our budget together.
Right, so literally the day before the financial conduct referendum.
Right.
I just wanted to confirm that was.
It would have been that
I
Tuesday, but
wasn't
we
sure.
had the posting issue, but
We had it till
And
Friday.
unfortunately, we find every year, that's.
Right, there's
Yeah.
variances.
Yeah, it's
in
not
the budget.
unusual, I mean, we do our budget in
Well, just
November.
because we do our budget so
So early.
early.
Right.
That's the thing.
And we did discuss the health insurance issue, both at the FTR and on television, and the transportation, just,
Well, the town has the same health insurance.
yes, they have the same issue that we have. Theirs went up at the same rate.
So, and can we, is this a good time to ask questions about that, or do you want to wait until we go to the?
How about-
when that- is that
How about when we do it as a
It's
line item?
separate.
How about a separate item?
Okay. And then, I'm having a hard time understanding exactly why we have a $39,000 deficit in the school
Okay.
lunch program.
Doug?
For the current fiscal year, we had a one-year guarantee with Chartwell's to break even. So even though we're probably going to run a similar deficit, Chartwell's, our food service provider, covered it. Going forward, that guarantee was just for 1 year. The second year of our contract, basically, we're responsible for any shortfalls in it.
So, I guess, I give my kids money to go buy lunch each day.
Yep.
And I'm assuming that that's paying for the lunch.
Exactly.
So where does that?
So in the
deficit
aggregate,
come
everyone
from?
that's paying for lunch and all the federal reimbursements we receive for the free and reduced students all come together and create our revenue for school lunches. And those revenues aren't sufficient to
Cover the
support
cost.
all the cost of food and employees that prepare the school lunches. And that's where the deficit comes from.
And our only other option would be to raise costs.
Right.
And then you
well,
might
that
lose
would
more
be the
people.
intuitive thing I would.
And
say
they have
we need to
increased
do.
sales, but
Yeah.
they haven't increased them to the point where we can break even on our own.
Right, we'd have to
They did
raise the
improve,
lunch
right.
price, but when you do that,
lose some people.
lose
Yeah, your
people.
participation drops off and you really aren't.
So it's a
getting far ahead.
catch-22
Our
almost.
problem specifically is up until a couple of years ago, we prepared foods for the Atlantis Charter School in Fall River, and that offset a lot of our expenses. We lost them, they decided to take their food service in-house, and we've been gradually chipping it away at the lost sales and revenue profit that we had from that, but we haven't quite made it up yet.
But we have a new school, don't we, St. Michael's?
St. Michael's is one of they're on board, we're preparing their lunches,
Yeah.
another school in Fall River, but it hasn't made up the entire
Right.
deficit yet that we lost when we lost the charter school.
And when we go on our food advisory trips, one of the things is the price that people complain about.
Yeah.
So, as you said, if you raise it up, you might lose more kids.
Yeah,
Excuse me.
we generally are on par with the other East Bay communities, and I'm reluctant to raise that because we've seen before when we raised it, you have a
It went
drop-off in
down, yeah.
participation, and it defeats the purpose of
You have
trying
a
to close
drop-off
the gap.
in participation, and then you have families who
That's-
kids aren't eating.
That's right, yeah.
That's
That's not what we want.
a worse issue.
Yeah.
The food that we get, is that, is like an approved list from the state?
Oh, yeah, there's a lot of restrictions on the foods that we can serve, and the food
You can buy them from certain places as well, or?
They have contracts, like national contracts, because they're an international company, so they make the most of their purchasing. They're also on the list to receive governmental food, sometimes through government purchases huge quantities of food and makes it available for school lunch programs, so we receive food that way as well. So it's a combination of ways. And they also have a buy
Do
local
they force you to
program.
buy a certain amount, quantity as well?
No, I think if you can, for the government piece of it?
Yeah.
No, even though you participate in this government school lunch program, you're not obligated to purchase any of those, so if you can find the same stuff cheaper or something you prefer, you're definitely able to do it that way.
And they do a good job trying to find things the kids will eat, because what good is it if they don't eat it, you know?
Right, they find a pretty good balance.
They
know
really
what
do.
sells, you know,
Yeah.
if the chicken nuggets are popular
Yeah,
through the government, they purchase them that way, otherwise they'll go to another vendor.
So I guess I'm still a little bit having a hard time understanding why we can't make this at least a zero sum.
We'd have to increase the
Re-
price.
re-
And that
Yeah,
doesn't bring in
You'd
more
have
net
to try-
revenue when
the
sales
only
not
way-
involved.
I kind of get that, but, does it ultimately mean that then all we should do is provide what we are reimbursed through the different programs? I mean, so I guess I'm playing devil's advocate here a little bit. I actually do think I understand it, but.
You're
I think
obligated
that-
to have the program at a certain level. You couldn't restrict it to a
Just
certain population.
To free and reduce
or-
hot lunch, for example.
We actually, the reimbursement for the free and reduce actually create more of a profit than we get for the kids that pay, so it's actually advantageous, kind of in an odd way for us to do it that way, but you can't
You have to
restrict
offer
who
it
you
to
sell.
everyone.
Well, you're right, you can't create a subgroup or offer it to a subgroup. Everybody's got to have access to it.
We're kind of boxed in where either you cut expenses, which Chartwell's pretty aggressively does, and we really don't have anything that really looks above and beyond any of our peer communities, or raise the revenue, which we're kind of on par with those as well. So it's difficult when you have a relatively small school district because you have some of the same overhead as the larger districts, but you just have a smaller pool of students to cover those costs.
And St. Michael's may help that, but at this point,
And ideally, I mean, they're pretty aggressive in seeking out other schools in the area that are looking for school lunch services. But
And then there's also the issue that you start to think, well, what would be the most popular items to sell as add-ons? And you can't sell
That's correct.
ice cream and potato chips and things that might be revenue,
They won't let you.
be positive revenue stream for
yeah,
you.
those are part of the long-term problems where they used to sell a lot of
lot
add-on
of it.
items that are no longer allowable.
Right. And
And
you're
that's
right,
cutting the
Carol's
profits as
right,
well.
we used to sell that all the time, quote, the junk, and that's
And
what
that'd
sold.
be the moneymakers.
And
That
that's
was a
why
big
they were never an issue
Even
for school
Gatorade or
committees.
baked chips or something like
Right.
that, they're not allowed to do.
Yeah, right,
anymore.
we used to get rebates from Gatorade and those companies, for the schools, if you had those machines in your building. Now
So by
it's
being
on-
very, kind of, it is what it is and it costs what it costs. The issue is that you can't have just a program that is for students that qualify for free and reduced lunch.
That's correct.
Because you have to have access to everyone.
Right.
That's right.
Everyone.
That's
Yeah.
correct.
The free and reduced lunch actually sounds like it's paying for itself and maybe then.
Because our reimbursement
And
is
the issue
is
is
high.
that because of the business model of only being allowed to offer certain things.
We're really constrained on what we
we're
can.
constrained both, and then, interesting.
Yeah, it really doesn't leave you a lot of options, unfortunately, and there are quite a few districts that end up subsidizing, which we've stayed away from, and
Yeah.
I've considered ourselves pretty fortunate, but ultimately, this year, I don't see any way around it.
Should we start catering for weddings in the fall?
Actually, the add-on catering type stuff is what, we don't have a lot of meetings.
So we don't have the
but-
money.
But they would love to provide more of that type of add-on stuff.
It's not in the budget.
Last superintendent who did that was having lobster dinners. Getting a little hot water for that.
All right. And I think, can you go to the next slide?
Sure.
I remember what, there was something else
Next one.
here. Oh, yeah. So the virtual high school, just to make sure everybody understands what that is, that was our capacity to
Offer
offer
online.
AP online
Courses,
courses that were not available.
Right, and that was the fee associated with using the VHS service.
Okay.
And that was one way of meeting a NEAS recommendation, I believe, was it a?
It was just really an opportunity for certain students to
Expand there.
try to find AP courses.
Take things we didn't
We're
know.
And we-
in this school.
Right, to expand our choices in
expand
a
the choices.
cost-effective manner, so
Right.
And
that
they
we,
didn't always
yeah.
fit in their schedule.
That's right.
But also with the goal of, hopefully that would take hold, and then offer other
Then would expand it,
courses
right?
that we can't offer because of our size, that students could take.
But we're
Unfortunately, but
postponing it.
again, these days,
At
and I'll just
best.
back it up, the virtual high school, just as a reminder, the teaching assistant, the math increase for the remedial math, and all day K, those are all new programs, that's it.
Right.
You know, that's what, you know,
So-
it's,
So the innovations we were trying to
right,
implement
have
over
to,
the last 8 months.
have to be, that's why we
this
use the
will
term postpone, because hopefully we can bring, you know, we will bring it back next year, because we thought it was important this year, obviously we think it's gonna be important next year. But right now, to offset that 423, and then the further reduction in the FTR, I mean, we have to be fiscal, we have to be solvent by law.
Well, we cannot have
cannot
we
know
cannot
any
have a
deficits
budget
back.
that's not balanced.
Right.
Right.
It's against the law to vote on a deficit budget.
So if that's it for right now, let me just finish quickly
Yep.
and then bring it back. Now, we look forward, since our jobs, and sometimes the future is bleak, and FY17, and Mrs. Black gave us the last 8 years or 9 years, I think she has in her plan, which is always showing, of our 1.8% increases, and how we've been able to contain costs. Well, because of that $423,000 structural deficit, and if you include the all-day K number, it drives it over $500,000. Those costs have to be accounted for FY17. That's not next year's budget, but the budget following. So a year from now, this is what we'll be wrestling with. We still have to deal with the health care, the 423, 238 that we just talked about. We want to put all-day K back in the budget. We believe it'll also be mandated by the state, and if it is, if the General Assembly follows Governor Raimondo's plan, if you don't have it by 17, they're going to take all your state aid. So we have to have it next year no matter what. Our salary increases, benefits, we still don't know what the pension cost is going to be. And we could be coming back to you about FY16, because that hasn't been settled yet, the pension issue. That hasn't been settled yet, so
We don't know yet.
we'll probably be coming back and saying, we've got another issue here,
Beyond the 523.
beyond the 523, because I can't imagine what they're going to tell Doug in 2 weeks. Oh, by the way, Tiverton's going to make out, it's going to cost you less or more than what you're paying. That's not going to be the case. So there will be some costs associated with that benefit.
And this is the, people that don't understand, this is, our pension is, our pension payments are from the state. Our contributions are state mandated.
Right. And with the.
Governor Raimundo made some changes that it went to suit.
Yeah.
They sued, now they're going to settle it. The results of that settlement are going to come back to the
That's correct.
districts.
And to the towns.
But we don't know what it is.
We don't know what it is.
Not only school, but
And, right,
Towns
municipalities,
as
absolutely.
But it's not going to be favorable to.
well, no, I'm
Most likely.
yes and no.
But how many of our employees are part of that pension reform?
Everybody.
All the full-time employees.
All of our teachers as well?
Yes. Teachers and council 94.
So can you explain a little bit salary, benefits, health, and
Yeah,
transportation?
salaries is increases for all our employees.
But this is for not next year, but
It's
the
for
year
2 years
out.
out.
Those are the typical increases we see from year to year, so as we go from
We just use
16
them
to
as a
17,
placeholder.
we put in a placeholder of what we historically see.
As an average. Healthcare is your health insurance, Delta Dental.
So you're anticipating based on history, that we'll probably have another $270,000 in salary and another $303,000 in
Healthcare.
healthcare costs in that fiscal year.
And again, it could be a little lower.
Yeah, we won't know our
But
renewal rates.
We just, again, now we're doing 2 years, 2.5 years out.
Right,
But
because we
it's-
could have
right.
savings
But
in
the point-
FY16,
The point-
but this is
right,
what we
right.
know right now.
This exercise is to say, the 423 just doesn't end with FY16.
Right.
No.
It carries
That-
over.
That it goes forward, that we've got things that we have to wrestle with.
Normally, we just have the new items for the new fiscal year, but unfortunately, the 423 is like an anchor that comes,
That will come back.
we just have to carry from 16 because we have a closer rate.
Transportation, even though the level won't go up as much as it did this year, but still $46,198. Utilities, and again, if we want to bring back these other positions, which I would like to,
Right.
this is where you end up. We call it a deficit because it's more than what we have currently. We'd be at 1.3 million in change in expenditures, which would be a 4.7% increase. that's looking 2 years out, but based on historicals, we're gonna be in a tough spot financially, working on 17 because of that structural deficit.
So that's over the cap, you need a waiver for that.
I'm sorry?
It's over the cap, you need a waiver for that.
Yeah, or we
Well-
always find a way to get it under.
But I mean, that's,
Now, that's not including any major increase in special ed. The pension, again, the pension issue we don't know about. So those, that chart that Mrs. Black keeps showing, we're gonna have it in our office to remind us of better days. Because at least in the next, 2 years out, 16 and 17, it's gonna be tougher for us financially to.
And I think
get on
that's
that.
why our town administrator was talking about getting together in the fall, to start doing it
Because they're-
2-3 years out.
Right, because they're in a similar position, probably in a tougher position than we are. But that's for another day and not for us.
All right.
But that's kind of where we are. So our recommendation is to go back, is to make these reductions, use our one-time credit. Unfortunately, LDK, we have to put off into 17.
As well as virtual
Right,
high
as well as
school.
virtual high school.
Remedial math,
remedial
digital
math,
literacy.
Our digital literacy
the
initiative.
librarian,
So, that's where we are.
Capital requests,
I'm sorry.
we're leaving capital requests.
Capital,
We have-
capital.
Because that's separate.
That's separate. Oh, there is one more page. Yeah, I forgot to say.
Oh, okay.
Which was a little bit, I think it's my glasses. This is our fund balance. Again, it's been talked about quite a bit. So Becky and I figured, let's show everybody where we are.
oh, this
Um,
is that.
Yes, that's what you have.
Mr.
there.
Barrett.
Yep. What? Well, that's bigger. I don't know.
Okay, go
And
ahead.
it's tough bringing in an Excel into a PowerPoint. I'm lucky we got this far. They're not gonna be able to get it done. Our audited balance as of July 1st, 14 was $1,694,495. In this year's
Sorry,
budget,
that was the what day?
July 1st, 2014.
2014, okay.
The most recent audit.
Because the fiscal year ends on the 30th.
Starting, okay.
Okay, capital requests that we have in this year's budget, $239,655.
So that's money we spent,
That-
we will have been spent as of June 30th this year.
Right, next month. So that brings the balance down to 1.4, or 1,454,840. In this year's budget, we have 268,670 put aside, which brings it down to 1.1 million, or 1.186,170.
And these are all basically one-time expenses
they're all
associated with
one-time.
maintenance of the schools.
Yeah.
Mostly health and safety related repairs,
Right.
especially for the 16.
And then the middle school furnace burner needed to be replaced. That cost $32,843. That brings it down to $1,053,327. We also put, the committee, on our recommendation, put an additional $250,000 aside to help defray the costs for the health and safety repairs to the middle school and high school, bringing us down to $903,327. Subsequently, we have met with the RGB people, and we're in the process of getting our plan to stage 1 to RIDE and getting their approval. And during our conversations with Dave Quattro, he told us districts can apply for up to $500,000 in emergency reimbursement if it's for health and safety issues. So we haven't voted on this, but to you, what we could use of that 903, we could use up to 500,000 by going through that list and picking off more things, and then get 40% reimbursement back to the town.
That goes to the town.
Right. So at the very least, we have 903,327, well, that's where we are right currently. We then will have to deal with the issue of these repairs. And if we did agree to go in that direction, it leaves just 400,000.
So,
I'm sorry,
yeah,
go ahead.
quick, you sort of jumped over
I'm
that
sorry.
a bit. So 500,000, so if we spent $500,000 in what are considered to be health and safety,
The reimbursement goes to the
Repairs.
town.
not to the district, not to the school.
Right, and the important thing to know about that is it's on a reimbursement basis, so we would need the funds available to purchase and do these repairs, and then subsequently get the money from the state. So you basically need the money up front, which we have, but we're gonna have that money getting used for a couple of months while this process takes place. So if you don't have the funds to do it, you can't receive the reimbursement.
Is the facilities subcommittee, are they ready to tick off?
You already.
Oh, they already have?
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I don't think your committee's accepted it. Yeah,
Oh.
we're ready.
Yeah.
So we have things that we can immediately
You
say,
can go
here,
to
this,
them,
this,
you
this.
can take off the list with the subcommittee's help. Do this one, do this one, do this
That
one.
RISE would say would qualify for this 40% reimbursement. That's a big chunk of change.
Well, that's $200,000
Yeah.
back, but that's $200,000 back to the town, not to
Well-
us.
No, we never see that.
So.
The town would
You're not gonna
have
make all-
400,000 for their
No,
own
I'm
capital
I'm not
improvements or whatever.
disputing that they are our partners, but
Right, but it doesn't
it's
come back
not
to us.
gonna make our budget more.
No.
Easier.
No,
Right,
it's not
doesn't
gonna help the
solve
budget issue, but it will help town-wide
It
because
helps to
these
pay
are,
the cost to get the
yeah,
work.
these are capital
Right.
expenses that the town ultimately is gonna have to have.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, it's everybody's,
But you're right, it won't help the
Money.
budget situation at all.
well, it's, we're responsible for our
No,
balance sheet.
you're right, you're right.
And and every district does it differently. Tiverton under the town, other districts, in this, if we did something like this, another district, they get the money.
Right.
It's set up so the money comes back to the school. It is what
In
it is.
another district, the town pays.
So,
Yes, in other districts, they pay for all the capital.
Yeah, so it's different everywhere.
as our ship is sinking, we can throw them a line.
Yeah.
Right.
Hopefully it's not an anchor.
Well, so,
But we just wanted to
We
demonstrate.
just wanted to show you where we were. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
403,000 would be the balance that we would have for other anticipated expenses. And as we can see by, the last 6 months.
we already have her $500,000.
Or even if you didn't want to go that route,
Yeah.
even if you didn't want to, the fact that we just got tagged with 400 plus, depending on how you look at it, $500,000 of unexpected costs. That can, so even if you left it at 900,000, and you got hit with another $400,000 bill, special ed or otherwise,
I'm concerned about
it
that.
could either
pension.
wipe you out.
Yep, the pension, yep.
403 to nothing, or it would lower us, from the 903. So how you want to proceed beyond that, we just showed it to you as an example as to how that fund balance would be, because it's obviously something that have to talk about. As far as I know.
So, are you all set? Bill?
Yes.
So I guess to start the conversation, I'm going to make a motion that we accept the superintendent's FY16 budget recommendation.
Do I have a second?
I'll second it.
Okay, for discussion? Okay. I think, go ahead.
It's pretty clear that, we have a problem with the budget and there is unanticipated expenses that are going to put us into the red if we do not cut something, as well as the fact that we have a lower amount approved by the voters for the budget. But just to speak to the motion on the floor, I think we have to digest this a little bit more than, and maybe hopefully get some input from the community as to, we're one of the interesting things is that the budget approved did not actually specify where the $127,000 should come from in the budget.
And it never
The
will.
reduction.
No, it's a done deal that it was approved. So it's not clear to me still where exactly, if we can get some insight from voters, I think that might be helpful, and maybe some people are here to speak today towards that. Additionally, I think it would be perhaps useful. There were 3 budget committee members who supported the alternative budget, as well as Mr. Katz himself, who was its principal author. I would like to hear from, at least those 4 individuals and any member of the town council or the budget committee, where exactly we should be going with this. I agree, we have to cut costs. There's no 2 ways around that. It's what costs we're going to cut that we really have to decide. So that would be my, I'm not sure that we want to take action on the motion, but I'm more than happy to hear other people's opinions about things.
Well, I guess, I mean, I have no problem hearing from the public, but I don't think anyone understands the budget as well as Doug and Bill.
I agree with you.
So I'm not sure somebody could come and say, you know what, my kids aren't in high school, cut AP.
Yes.
I'm always, you know, you want to hear from the public, but at the end of the day, it's those two and the five of us that have to decide what's the best way to balance our budget that's going to serve all 1,800 kids.
Yes.
And I'm not sure that I mean, you're going to hear people say, well, I want all-day K because I want all-day K for my kid. I want that virtual AP class because I want that virtual AP class. Just from experience, having been on here for 5 years, that's kind of what we hear, and I understand that. And at the end of the day, we all have to sit here and say, we need to find $500 and something thousand in savings. Where's it going to come from?
Maybe I can, I agree we should hear what folks have to say, as we always do. My thinking behind this is that we're not cutting anything that we currently have.
Right.
This
These were new
represents
programs.
very important initiatives for us, no question about it. We've been advocating for all-day K for a long time. The virtual high school is just the tip of the iceberg, digital literacy, you know how important that is. And no one was more disappointed than I was when we didn't win the FTR. However, that combined with these other drivers forces us, in other words, if this was known to us when we did the budget in February, I would have had to recommend to the committee, these things come out.
Yeah.
Okay, so.
Or we ask for a higher amount.
Or we ask for more money, right, which would have really driven up our costs. Either way, this would have been in play had we known it, because they're new programs. Bottom line, at the end of the day, is we maintain everything that we have. This is stuff we want to have. At some point, hopefully we get it all. But right now, due to our financial constraints, I think this is the best, way for the committee to proceed. It keeps us whole.
Yeah, no, I don't dispute at all that this may in fact be the best way to proceed. I suspect it actually is. Nor do I dispute the fact that we ultimately have the responsibility for making these decisions. But I would like to hear more, and maybe we'll hear everything we need to hear tonight from members of the public we're here. But I would like to hear more from members of the public. And I do think it would be useful to, hear from the people who put forward the alternative budget. And if they have no idea, that's fine. Well, it's not fine, but if they have no approach to this problem, despite their experience of formulating an alternative budget, it's useful to hear that they don't have any approach to this problem. So, and
I think their approach to the email was that
Take it out of reserves.
but I mean, granted, have them say it's different, but that's, we were all there at those meetings.
Toward that point, again, something I think we need to make very explicit. So the reserves that we have up there are fund balance. Through things that we've already budgeted for safe and health and safety reasons in the school system, is going to bring us down into somewhere between $400,000 and $900,000, depending on what we do with that other $500,000. We are not actually required by the charter in the same way that the town is to maintain a fund balance of any sort. That is correct. That's correct. However, not maintaining any kind of budget or fund balance really puts us at risk of running a deficit budget.
At some point,
And
yes.
we're dangerously close to that, because all we need is another,
Bad experience.
bad experience with transportation or healthcare costs or whatever to put us into the red. The town is required by charter to maintain 3%, maintain 3% near fund balance, but we actually don't have a requirement. And at 900,000, we are roughly 2.5%. Did I do that right?
Yeah, that's 1.37 before,
So we're already under that.
Yeah, we're under the 3%
3%.
threshold, absolutely.
Without,
Without anything.
Without
The
anything.
903 puts us at 2.6.
so if we, say we theoretically said we have a $500,000 budget, give or take or deficit right now in the budget for the next fiscal year. That would put us at 400,000, which is less than,
Will put us at about the 403 mark, where we are up there in that.
Right.
Because that'd be a little less than 403, because we're talking 500,000 in that example, so it's more than, so you'd be under
2%.
You'd be under, way under 2%.
And I think that people often, they don't understand, it's not just a one-year issue.
oh yeah.
You use it, it puts you under 400,000. If you're not appropriated it, if the people do not put that 400,000 in our budget line next year,
Yeah, in the form of an increase.
in form of an increase, you're now either going to have to make $400,000 worth of cuts, or you're
Yeah.
gonna have to use
Yes.
the rest of it.
Right.
Which is
Well, there's
what
gonna be no
communities like
some honest.
Newport and Warwick have done, and they're in tough shape. Newport is taking out a loan
1.4.
to pay for their school system.
To help offset.
Warwick has been, at least the last 2 years, in legal battle with their town because they were using reserves to plug operating budgets, and they're in,
And the state, to some degree,
well, the state
is a
helps,
bigger
yeah.
example of that. You know, the tobacco money, they went to $1.5 billion by taking out those subsidies that we got from the government, from the settlement, and put it towards operational expenses, and then they couldn't make it up. So it's at every level.
It's just postponing a decision, a hard decision.
Right.
so have to be-
No, and I suspect we will have a very hard decision to make in the next, 2 weeks, 4 weeks, maybe tonight. I'm just suggesting that, we need to make sure we understand explicitly what we're doing, as well as have as much input as we possibly can get from, parents, taxpayers, people who sort of suggested that this is the budget that we should have as opposed to the budget we proposed.
And that's another thing that I'd also say to the committee, we do have to recognize what the voters said. They
Yeah.
got us that money,
And it was a clear choice that money was for all decades.
and we made it clear what the ramifications would be. And unfortunately, now we're at that fork in the road, where we hope we wouldn't be. I agree, we should hear what folks have to say.
Mr. Arruda? Mr. Arruda?
I'll listen to some public comment
Okay,
first.
okay.
Did Mr. Cabral?
Mr.
did you
Cabral,
want
I'm
to
sorry,
speak?
you want to.
The only statement that I wanted to make is the fund balance was the whole thing as far as the election. That's where the signs were, that's where everyone was talking about having extra money in town. But when you look at the fund balance, it doesn't go into the budget. The fund balance has to be a one-time expense. And if you, like you're saying, if you backfill the budget, it just compounds itself every year. And that's what vote number 2 did to us. It's what it did to the town last year, and it also did to the town and to the school department this year.
That's the point I was trying to make to people in one of the letters I wrote. But I'm not sure how else to bring it across. I mean, Westport was, selectmen brought in the Massachusetts Board of Revenue, the Division of Local Services, to look at their finances again. Why can't we maintain our funds? Well, because you're using savings to.
For operating
And
costs.
this is not the first time that they've had to deal with this. This is over years. This has been going on there for years.
Well, Tiverton has done this in the past too.
Yeah, like about 7, 8 years ago, we were doing this, but there were reasons for that, and it wasn't because we wanted to offset taxes. Well, it was for taxes, but there were reasons to offset the taxes because we had school bonds coming on. We would reduce state aid to the town, into the schools. It's like, what can we do? So that was a time that we didn't do that. And the only alternative is to raise taxes. Westport is going to be in that predicament. So.
And this is what's created by putting budgets together, where people that put the budget together don't look at what a budget is and what a one-time expense is.
Or don't look out 2 years. They're
Right.
just looking at tax relief this year.
Period.
It's a simplistic argument to say, take it out of the surplus.
And I don't see the petitioner here either. He didn't participate in any other public forums last year. and
No, when I was on the council for the last 2 years, we made a point to put a 5-year plan together so we can basically manage our capital expenses and not keep having to borrow money every year.
Yeah.
We're always borrowing money for plow trucks. We're always borrowing money for fire trucks. We're always borrowing money for ambulances. It's crazy. You can't, it's not sustainable. You always keep borrowing. And then eventually you bust.
Okay, so yes, please come up.
I was just wondering if Budget 1 had gone through and was voted in, would we have dipped into the reserve to cover the extra costs that, how would you have covered the, I forget what it was?
Well, we would be having the same discussion.
We have the same discussion about.
We would have to have made cuts.
We would
We'd
have.
still have the 420.
So you would have to decide then what programs to
Would
cut?
still be there. Everything else new would have to come out.
And generally, that's not unusual at this time of year, because now you're aware of a lot more than we were 6 months ago when we put the budget together. Generally, the last few years have been favorable news over that time period. This year, it all came negative.
And we've had plenty of years where it didn't. I think people think you have a FTR vote and we're done, an FTM. We're not. We always end up coming back.
Yes.
The very next meeting,
To make adjustments.
sometimes we have to adjust out. Sometimes it's favorable and we're like, okay, let's, hope it stays.
That's generally how we've built our fund balance.
So this meeting is quite typical. I mean, we have one every time.
Well, it's typical and it's not. If things had, it's really chance that has driven a lot of this, and that we really never expected the transportation increase that we have. And we weren't aware of, but.
It's not chance. We
Well-
do our best estimate
No, but
based on history,
if we
and
had.
sometimes you're wrong.
I guess
That's
if
budgeting.
If we had seen that coming, or had any way of seeing that
Oh,
coming,
yeah,
I
yeah.
don't think it was a
Absolutely.
fault on our part.
Absolutely.
It's still, and we still need to discuss, where does 17% come from? But, if we had been aware of those added expenses when we were making the budget, we would have said,
Well, we
it is
wouldn't
what
have
it is.
added anything, that's for sure. We probably wouldn't have added
Our
anything.
request have been
Probably-
adjusted or cut.
Or all they came may have been in question.
Yeah.
Because
Right.
we were looking at such a
And-
huge number.
Or we would have understood that we needed to ask for
Right, we
money.
would have made
Yes.
a completely
And-
different recommendation because we would have had
Had
better
different numbers,
information,
you're right.
which is what we're doing now.
Which, and I guess the chance part of it is, we literally were aware of that May 15th.
We could find out
Was-
6 months from now, we
I
could
know.
get hit with
Well,
a $200,000
Which is why we
bill.
can't just raise reserves to, so, anyway.
Is there anyone else that wants to say something? No? Okay, so when we talk about this chart of mine all the time, it starts in '08 and it goes down. And the average, '08 to '9, is 1.7%. So when you want to read signs, control your taxes, that's what we've been doing every single year, balancing out what the school needs, what the children need, and everything else, and we know the town's paying for it. So this year, we're at 0.6, 0.6, okay? Think about your household budget. Think about us standing 3 days out in the street, support the budget committee, town council, school committee budget, support our circle of opportunity. That's what that was, the opportunity to have all-day K, virtual learning. It wasn't just all-day K, it was all these other things. For the town to have the planner and the League of Cities and Towns and all the things we sat since January till May, every week. I'm telling you, fighting about. Don't think it's a pretty show out there, because it's not. We need this and we need that, and you don't have. And everybody, every week when I came in, they said, Sally, you guys did an amazing job on that budget. You're asking for only 1%. You use your fund balance to fix your schools. I have this special folder. If anything happens to me, everybody, get a hold of this special folder, okay? It has all the really special things in it. And not long ago, we were going out for the septic system. A lot of you will remember that. We were told by DEM we had to replace it. We certified our custodian to test it every week. We had to go through all that. And we put away $400,000. And then that night, we came in and there was a whole bunch of people in here saying, we talked to DEM today, you don't need $400,000. You're just saying that. That's going to be $250,000. So I'm like, really? So then I got phone calls when I got home, and they said, the bad news, Sally, is it's going to be more than $400,000. And these were people from DEM and people that had worked there. And it ended up being almost $700,000, we all know that. we kept putting the money away. It's a good thing we did. It was health and safety. If we didn't have that money, the town council would have had to take it out of the general fund because 3 schools would have closed. That's what we do. We're responsible. We listen to Mr. Eric, we listen to Mr. Fiore. And when people who have a degree in English get their degree in finance, I want them to come up here and tell me how to run the school department. No one wanted all-day K more than me since '07. Every year, Mr. Eric, Sally, it can't fit in the budget, it's gonna be too high, we all know how much we need it. We went on television, we talked about it, we all wrote letters, we talked about it. We talked about what it was gonna mean to vote for budget number 1 or budget number 2. So people went out and they voted for budget number 2. And I'm glad we did better this year. We had 700 last year. This year we had 1,066 citizens that came forward to raise their taxes to pay for what the town needs. And I thank them. I thank everyone that came out because everyone has a right to their vote. But now we have this horrible situation with all this new news. Now don't forget, when we had the town meeting, I have a paper in here that says an hour before the town meeting, we had a meeting to adjust our budget because we got new news in. That's how far out it went. We have to have this in March. It's crazy. We don't even have the numbers yet. So the whole thing has to be looked at. But anyway, I just want to say this is a terrible situation we're in. You know, we all want all-day K with all our hearts and all those other, the virtual learning was so exciting, the librarian, to help the kids with the remedial math, everything to move us forward and to get us into the 21st century. And don't think we don't want it. Anybody in this town, please. But we're faced with the facts of what's here. And we can't have once we had a structural deficit, when they took away $600,000 at that town meeting, we had a meeting like this. And we had to send a corrective action plan to the town administrator within 10 days. That's how serious it is. You have to tell them where you're going to cut and how you're going to make it into the Department of Administration. And then one year I was sitting there before Mr. Fiore came, front seat like I sit, and the auditor came and they said the school department's minus 14,000. I said, oh my God, I wanted to sit under the seat. I never want to be there again. It's an awful situation. So here we are, and we have to make decisions, and we have to listen to our leadership. And so I don't know, however, Carol, you haven't spoken yet. Would you like to say something?
Well, just that, like everyone else, I was so excited this year at the thought of getting all-day K for a minimal increase of 1%, which I did the math, and it would have meant that someone who owns a house assessed at $300,000 would pay $24 more in taxes next year than they pay this year. $24 more, not only for all-day K, but for our other positions and for the town side. People were not willing to pay that extra $24 a year, and so there went the all-day K funding. Unfortunately, we now find out we don't have funding for any of the new initiatives. I wish the news were different, but I can't cut existing programs, Jerry, in favor of these new ones. There's no existing program that, that's what you seem to be suggesting, that instead of saying, well, we'll postpone, that an option would be to keep something new and make a cut to an existing program?
No, actually, that's, I agree there have to be cuts. Again, I think that's incontrovertible. What I'm suggesting is that we don't necessarily need to make that decision tonight in favor of if, maybe somebody has a great idea, and it's as nebulous as that. Not that I think that Bill and Doug know the budget better than anybody and have come to us with their best recommendation, and I expect that at the end of the day, we will vote on their recommendation and approve it. What I want to leave open, though, is the possibility that we can hear more from members of the community, as well as I think we should formally invite, the 3 members of the budget committee who did support budget number 2, even though they had actually voted out our budget unanimously. And Mr. Katz to come and, offer us his insight. I would like to hear it.
Well, I think, Jerry, while he put a budget forward, it was really 1,500 people who voted for that.
No, I
So unless, I mean, it's
And-
not
and-
it's not
so I'm
really
not-
his
I'm-
place. We're the elected officials. It's not really his place to say where we should or shouldn't cut. I understand what you're saying, but I just think you're really going down a path that is really not going to be fruitful. I mean, we have
But a good point to
1,500
make
people.
on his behalf is that the minority of the budget committee
Right,
are getting
right.
majority of the time.
I
So-
recognize.
And like Bill said, I think they've been very clear, they want us to use our fund reserve. That's
Right.
been said over and over and over and over.
I agree with you, it's not likely to be
I mean,
fruitful.
we need to move forward. We have a month to balance our budget, and we need to, we need to let people know, we need to make decisions. Bill and Doug need to move forward.
Not to add, I guess it is to add, any other cuts to programs, even if you wanted to go down that road, you're constrained by the June 1st.
Right, absolutely, I hadn't
You
thought
can't
of that.
lay off, or the committee cannot lay off anyone else after June 1st. So any type of savings couldn't come from, unless you wanted to meet on Friday and told me to come up with a plan between now and Friday. Show me something that has these, dollar for dollar savings.
Right.
Then you'd have to act, and then I wouldn't have enough time to notice the employees. It just,
Right.
it's just from a timing standpoint, it's not really practical to say, we're gonna look at other programs. If some, in other words, not us, but if someone off the street, nebulous idea that we reference, someone might say that, well, it's not practical because we can't do it from a timeline standpoint, and never mind a philosophical standpoint, but wanting to reduce what we currently offer, so just to keep that, but it's not one way, it's just something.
Ron's also waiting on our answer on the grant, because if we don't take money for 100K, they're gonna reallocate it to someone else, and it still needs to be used by April 30th.
So again, I do not dispute that we ultimately have to make that decision. I'm not asking anyone else to make that decision. And I recognize that it was 1,500 people, not just those 2 members of the budget committee or Mr. Cass that approved the second budget. And I'd love to hear from any one of those 1,500 people as well. So I guess my
But,
proposition.
Jerry, this was an open meeting, it was noticed. No one said anything. I'm not sure what you think you're gonna get out of another meeting. I mean, why weren't these people here today? The budget probably.
Slim possibility that we'll hear
Okay.
something that
I respect that.
will be useful to
I don't agree,
making our
but
decision.
absolutely respect your opinion.
Okay.
Just like I said, just a couple quick comments.
Oh, sure.
The thing I'm struggling with ever since the budget passed is now, this decision is now in my lap to make, or in all of our laps to make. And the problem I have with it is, you have a non-elected person who basically now, in a way, controls the budgets of the town and indirectly of the school. You can't hit the line items in the school budget, but cutting them out basically indirectly controls what we can and cannot do. Now, the issue I have is that the statement, of course, we've already heard, we can just take it, the school has plenty of money, they can just take it out of the money bags and the money machine that they have in the technology department, just print it out dollar bills. Well, the problem is, that's not true. And if anyone actually wants to see the facts for themselves, instead of just take it secondhand from someone without actually seeing it for themselves, I don't know what to do. But the issue I have is, the person doesn't have the courage to say that, yeah, I'm gonna take away this money, but the thing is, they're gonna figure out what to do with it. So he washes his hands
That's the reality.
of the responsibility. And if he really wants to take responsibility for the town's financial well-being, then he has to take responsibility for the consequences of that. And instead of just passing the buck off, which he's done, and that is what it is, this reality situation, we're gonna deal with it. So a non-elected person with a minority of the budget committee gets the majority of the people of the town to vote for his budget, which was basically, now, of course, they're gonna make this a political ploy. Oh, see, they're not gonna do it because it's Tiverton first and yada, 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 they're just trying to make a statement. No, the problem is, I don't wanna spend money out of reserves to pay for operational expenses. The all-day K has to be funded in our budget. It has to be in the budget every year. And Carol, you made the point. How do we know what's gonna get cut next year? We don't. So they meet in their, whatever house they meet in, and they come up with their master plan, twisting their mustaches, and let them figure it out. Let the elected people figure it out. Well, sorry, but.
That's what the charter allows.
Right, and that's the point I'm making, is that that's an issue. Even if it was my own budget, I still have a problem with that. It basically circumvents the democratic process. People were elected to these positions, to the town council, and to the budget committee, and we're not gonna go along with all the work that they've done, that they were elected to do, and we just have someone come off the street and then just run the town. And that's basically what it is. So you know what? We should probably just all elected people should just resign their positions and just put a crown on top of his head. And now we have a king. That's what it is.
Jim, just to sort of point out, it's what the charter allows, but also what really circumvented the democratic process, I guess, in my view. And I can't prove it one way or another because the people didn't vote.
Right.
The voter turnout was, Ms. Black was telling me 22%. I didn't think it was that low, but it was pretty low.
There's over 12,000 registered voters right now.
So
It's a big number.
2,500 yeah,
Big
you're
number.
right.
Yeah.
That's why I say, it is what it is, and now we just have to go make a decision and go forward. That's why it is what it is.
The decision we're making is not for political problems.
No.
It's not.
No.
It is what
Not
it
at
is.
all.
This is how we got to maintain
What I
our
would
school
say
budget.
is, and I think Deb mentioned it, maybe Carol, and Sarah just did. The committee's been praised publicly by some of those three people, that we manage our budget well, the three members on the budget committee. They give us kudos for that. Okay, then taking money out of our reserve is just the opposite of that. You can't have it both ways. You can't say, hey, school committee, you guys are managing your money well. Oh, but by the way, to make this work, do something that's financially unsound and take out of your reserve. The hypocrisy is just overwhelming, and you can't do it both ways. What this budget is, it's a continuation of our how we've acted fiscally responsible for years,
And we're not cutting anything.
and
We're just not implementing the programs.
I think that's been the issue, is that because the last few years we've been able to maintain our budgets well,
Yeah.
this has been a less of a hit. So people say, oh, well, they said the sky was going to fall. First of all, no one said the sky was going to fall, number one. It was going to affect our credit rating, which is probably going to do. Now, Portsmouth was praised for their credit, for their reserves, and they got a AAA bond rating.
And so will
Because they have
Compton.
such strong reserves, that's why. So there's no mystery around this. And I can't even think of it.
I think we were talking about this, that just for point of reference, charter schools, which are managed by RIDE, their reserve requirements, 15%? 15.
And I also asked the general, right, and I asked the General Assembly, I said, the money follows the child. So if a child goes to the charter school, the money goes right along with them. So if we want all-day K, why aren't we getting the money right away to go with those children? Why do we have to wait, right? No answer. Of course not.
I mean, regardless of the process, the people voted, we have to respect that, and then we need to look at what we have and do the best job we can with the information that's before us. I don't believe 2 weeks is going to give us any new information.
It could get worse with the
And it could get
pensions.
worse with the pension.
From a parliamentary view here, you have a budget, a motion.
and second.
We gotta
Yeah.
just-
Oh, true.
Does anyone else want to say anything now from the public?
We'll be nice.
We always
I
are.
didn't know if I could
We
speak.
always are.
And I had two things and I already forgot one. But what I implore you all to do, because we have to do a better job of educating everyone in this town, young, middles, and old, is to sing from the rooftops, have articles, go on Cox Cable and do shows, and speak every time we use our reserve fund to fund anything. It can go out in the all district email, it can go in all the elementary schools' little newsletters that they send home every month, but we need to do a better job of actually saying what we're spending on. And I do think that the information that came out tonight needs to be funneled through a system as well, because the people from budget number 2 are going to spin this in their own creative ways that the school department just doesn't want to spend their money and they don't want all-day K. So I implore you to do some great, great, great PR every single time that we use a dime out of that reserve fund.
Good idea, thank you. Anyone else? You can really feel free to come up and say you came out. Do you want to say anything? No? Okay.
So
I have one more.
Wait a minute, Mr. Dr. Oh, come in.
I am not a life resident here, but I've been here for 34 years. My children went to the schools here in the system, and for 34 years, I've been hearing people always bashing the teachers. They make too much money, they do this, they have summers off. My daughter's lifelong dream was when she graduated and went to college that she wanted to teach in her alma mater. She's a teacher here in the high school for 10 years. She's very proud, and I've seen what she goes through, and my recommendation is to go with Mr. Rarick, because like the gentleman says, he's going to put a crown on his head and say, see, we got our way. So that is my recommendation to the school department committee, to adhere Mr. Rarick, who knows better than he does on what the school need, not somebody off the street, that their children don't even go to these schools.
Thank you. Anyone else? Dr. Lockett?
So lest, anyone have any doubts, I fully support pre-K. I think it is the most important thing we could do to improve the education of our children and their future aspirations. It is the money spent most wisely. You get the most bang for your buck in that investment. And I think it's a tragedy if we cannot do that this year, but we will keep on trying. And I am not, I would still make that ploy or plea to invite members of the budget committee who did not support us and members of the budget committee who did support us and any member of the public, including Mr. Katz and his unnamed co-authors of his budget. But having said that, if the majority of the committee is to make a decision tonight, I will support the decision of the majority.
Yes?
Can I just, would there be any benefit to having, even if it's not a response from supporters of budget number 2, and kind of say, we are asking for your suggestions. We had our school committee meeting. Unfortunately, none of you were there to offer your thoughts. Would it be beneficial? Because most likely we're going to be in the same situation next year, and there's going to be a budget number 2 that comes out, at the last minute, that he or they can actually put it up there. And I don't know, can we?
Convinced Sarah we're letting them control our decisions?
No.
We were elected by 60% of the voters. 60% to make decisions about the budget. Now, people absolutely have a right to say, we don't want to spend X, we want to spend Y. But then it's up to the 5 of us to decide what's the best way to spend Y on 1,800 kids. I agree with Ms. Raposa that asking someone who has no children in the district to come forward and say where he thinks we should put it, there's no benefit to that. I mean, what's the benefit? Superintendent Rearick, Mr. Fiore, our principals, our administrators, our teachers, every day, they work in it, they're the bottom line. They're telling us where this
And I
year
think
we
it's
can
still
balance the budget.
your decision to make. I wonder if it will lessen the strength of a budget number 2 next year if we say, hey, you voted this in, what are your suggestions for how to make this budget work? And if there's no suggestions, at least next year, you could say,
I think to Bill's point, we heard the suggestions over and over and over in letter, and letter, and letter, and letter. Every single one of them said, use your surplus. Every single letter said, use your surplus.
yeah.
And it is the issue with the budget
Right.
scenario now. Because of last year's $600,000.
Well, at the
pull
town
out-
level.
Town level, okay. We're now behind $600,000 on tax revenues that we didn't get for this year.
And then another
And now we
360.
need another $360,000 for next year.
Yeah.
So now the towns will be roughly $960,000 behind on tax revenues it was expecting to have to maintain services, and now we're not there. So now we're short $900,000. Now, unfortunately, this works in his favor, because now to try and make up for this difference, what has to happen? We have to raise our taxes.
Or you have to cut services.
Right, or we have to cut services. So guess what happens now every year from now on? Budget 2 wins.
Yeah, I just wonder if there was anything that we could do right now that would kind of just say, okay, you've had your chance to come in and give us your ideas of how you would make this work. And these are the reasons.
He asked that at the hearing, and what was his answer? Take it out of reserves. That was asked. by
Well,
three or four
and to
different
put it
people.
out there, in that now we have another $200,000 in unexpected expenses that, that's what our problem is, I
I
don't know.
just think we need to make a decision, but thank you, Sarah.
And just 1 minute, because this isn't new. I said this on the forum. This isn't this year, that just came up, and, can we try to work together? This has been going on since 2011. I just got a little thing I can read here. What? Well, this is my first one I have here. Listening to these discussions are like listening to con artists figuring out how they're going to manipulate the public to ensure that the people who pay the bills never get a break. That's what Justin Katz wrote while he was sitting back there
About us.
about the school committee. Okay, so if somebody says, they're gonna say you're liars, well, wait a minute, Tiverton faults, I mean, it's not the first time we've heard that. So, I mean, we have to listen to what we think is best for, as she keeps saying, all the kids in the district, and,
I think the best way to look at it is from we offered a 1% budget increase
Right.
for all day K.
you
It
know,
wasn't good enough for the petitioner and his followers. No matter what we do moving forward, we'll never be, if that's not good enough, next year's certainly not gonna be good enough. And we have to brace for what's ahead, and we have to plan accordingly. If there was no negotiations with a 1% budget or reasonableness, that you still had to cut us, it will never happen. You can't appease that mindset. It just simply won't work, no matter what we do.
You don't negotiate with hostage takers.
yes, Dennis?
Yeah, I know this is a very tough decision, but I just think like if you give them opportunity to have some power, they might do further damage. They may, you know what I'm saying? So that's just my concern too. I've been in district now, it's my 11th year, and I know this is a very difficult decision. I've been a part of it and seen a lot of it, and I just think, obviously it's a tough decision, but I agree with Superintendent Rurick on, the budget as far as, what we have to do. And I think hopefully postponing things and hope that we get it next year might be the way to go. But I just fear that if we give someone an opportunity who wasn't elected to have some power, that they may do things that might make things worse, and then we'll be in a tough situation. So that's just my opinion, so thank you.
Thank you, Dennis. Okay.
Nope.
I'm just wondering if you have an idea of how many kindergarten children would be entering in the fall that would need.
Between 120 and 130.
So more, you need more classrooms than you?
Yes, because you'd have to have them here full-time. The total number of students is about where we are this year, but because you have to do it all day, you have to expand the number of classrooms.
Of course.
Teachers.
And then, I'm an administrator of a Head Start program, so I know everybody's on the same page about the importance of early education. But I do feel like reading the news and seeing how much it's going to cost, it's not really a huge burden on the town. It's
We didn't think so.
offset about,
and yet
was
we
$126,000.
wouldn't appropriate the funds.
So I just feel that, you know, I'm not a budget person, but I just feel like you're saying, we're all fearful this will never happen, and it seems like this year it's a good deal for the
That's what we
amount of
thought.
money.
That's what we thought, that's why we were so excited
For
that it would
1%,
pass.
And so is there
voters would not support it.
any way we can postpone a decision to, or come up with a way to get more community action or more people out there? Because we're one of 3 towns left in the state that are not moving forward in this direction. My first grader needed to know what the word outlandish meant today. He's 6. The stakes are very high.
Outside of having another vote, this is it.
Yeah, so I think the answer to that is there was a financial town hearing.
Referendum.
There was the referendum itself. There were letters in the newspaper.
Postcards,
There was a
mailings.
1% budget.
We went out on TV to explain to
Yeah.
everybody, you know.
And I went and I voted, and I felt like I was one of the only people voting for Budget 1 that day.
Well, you
but-
know, again, the voter turnout was very low, and unfortunately, the timing of it, in that it's not a general election, it's only, I mean, we could sort of talk about why did it win. Voter turnout was low. It's an easy message. People are voting for a number, they're not voting for people. It was a very reasonable budget.
So-
And it lost because if voter turnout is low, and it's just a number, it favors a certain extreme.
Yeah. And I know, I mean, I can't think of a program that I would say cut that to make this.
Right, and that's the other part of the equation. You know, we were suggesting, or I was suggesting, not we, I was suggesting,
Yeah.
that perhaps there is another way of doing this, and it would be nice to hear from the public what those ways are, without a very specific idea in myself, you know, for myself, what that way would be. But ultimately, it would require cutting something else. What is incontrovertible is that cuts are necessary, because we cannot let the reserve drop down so low that we are at risk of being insolvent. That's legal, and it's also, you know, extremely foolish and jeopardizes what we have. So it's really a, you know, risk aversion strategy that we are, we don't want to jeopardize what we have at the cost of something which we have been clearly told, the people who voted, and it should be very clear, it's the people who voted who made the decision, not the voters of Tiverton. The voters of Tiverton, unfortunately, made their decision by not showing up.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I just have a quick question, and I'm sorry, because I came into this late. I was at
Sure.
a softball game for my daughter and
That's okay.
took her. I have a 5-year-old that will be starting kindergarten in Picasset, and I did vote for Budget 1. And I feel like through social media and things, there was a lot of misinformation by Mr. Katz and his group that really fed into this.
Yep.
However, we're now stuck in this predicament. What I would like to find out is, I understand why you don't want to touch your reserves and why you don't want to cut programs, but is there somewhere in the medium to pull some funds from possibly reserves, not all of it, and maybe cut something that's non-essential to an education that may benefit my child and other children?
That might have been true for the 423,000. Unfortunately, because I don't know if you saw it, if you go back, when we put our budget together, we do our best estimates. That number came up after. So we not only have to find savings because our budget didn't get approved by the people, we have to find that 423,000 on top of it.
But On the bus, wasn't it back when we met originally and wasn't there $70,000 that you got back by eliminating the afternoon school bus? But you put it back in, but if you were able to get that 70,000 back towards the 130 that you need for all-day K?
Right.
Because it's a little less than half of it is the
So-
afternoon school bus.
So the answer really to your question is, would we consider, we would consider everything. We're considering everything right now.
Right.
And I think the answer is, if we had no other unfavorable budget numbers, and again,
I
and,
think
you know,
definitely, yeah.
then I think it would be something we would consider. But with, a 17% jump in the transportation costs, and we will be discussing that later, with these unanticipated healthcare costs, which we are actually, in a sense, using a reserve because we're using money from an account that was, sort of with our, with the trust. Maybe it would have been reasonable then. But this really, again, is the flaw of allowing a budget where there's no insight into how it's arrived at. The lack of insight was there may be unexpected
I totally
costs
agree.
that are not accounted for in any way. And so you don't take, money from the reserve
That's
to,
what we kept saying.
I totally agree. I feel like
So-
that he has started this firestorm of rumor and people fed into it, but now it's like we're all stuck
And-
with a difference of about 400 votes.
the chance issue here, though Ms. Palish doesn't like that word, the chance here was that number, when did we get it? About 6 o'clock on May 15th.
That
1,100 votes had already been
transportation number.
cast
Yeah,
at the
it's
town
true.
hall, and there was no way to publicize that. I think perhaps things would have been different. Certainly if we had had that number in December, we would have said, it's not a 1% increase, it's a 2% increase, or whatever the appropriate number was, and then we would have, strategically been in a much better position. And now, what's gonna happen next year? They're gonna be looking at a very substantial increase just to maintain at par, among which is going to be mandated all-day K.
Potentially.
Potentially, we think, it depends on what the legislature and the governor do, but there's a very good possibility. I think that will go
And
through.
part of that is our budget process. Most towns don't finish their budget until.
They're doing it right now.
They're doing it now.
Well,
Right
very-
now.
Because of the budget process that we have to have a budget done in March.
And-
It's like 18 months before.
We even have
It's
numbers.
incredible
So,
how.
frankly, very few political entities of any sort
Really?
allow an alternative budget to be proposed with such a low threshold. If you want to ask me, that's the original sin. The original sin is the charter. It allows someone who doesn't know what they're talking about to put forward a budget that is completely misguided. And then people vote for it because of rumor, innuendo.
Because all they
and
think
falsehood.
is that their taxes are going to be less.
It's an inferior. I mean, and
When you
people.
don't have to support your claims, just create a firestorm. This is the outcome. The elected officials, both here and the council, now have to live and make these numbers work.
And we do understand, like Sally said, we do understand people are hurting. It's not like we're pushing through 4%
No,
increases every year. We try the best we can to focus on what we really need and ask for just that.
But the notion of people losing their houses
Yeah,
because of taxes is, I'm sorry, it's absurd.
well, I
You're gonna
think
save
Carol, at least
$75
this year it was
The average homeowner saves
$24.
$75, that's gonna save your home $75 for the year? Really?
Well, it was 24.
It would have been a
No, the
$24
tax savings that
increase.
were put forward by the budget too.
Okay, so, yes, Mr.
Just one first
Kabua.
thing I'd like to add is this is going to be reported, that the school department balanced their budget. If you vote that tonight, or 2 weeks from now, or a month from now. The only way you're balancing your budget is you're cutting things that were in the budget. There wasn't extra money in the budget, Mrs. Katz always seems to want to refer to. You're cutting all the new initiatives that were in the budget to balance the budget, because we didn't get the funding that was needed.
Yes. Yes, we are.
Okay. It's time to vote. All those in favor of supporting, is it your motion, Deb?
Yes.
Against? Okay, thank you, everyone.
Can we say with regret?
With regret, yes, please put that on there.
Thank you, Bill and Doug. I know this was not a fun exercise. Five B, some good news.
Oh, yes, matching funds.
Transportation funds.
No.
No.
Five B.
Okay. Yes, you,
The anonymous donation.
yes, it was an anonymous, okay, I was one ahead. We had an anonymous donation of $10,000 to go towards the replacement of the lights and the sound system in the auditorium. And I believe there was also $2,000 also been raised to date. And the committee agreed
Can you hear, Kelly? You look like
agreed
you
a
can.
few months ago to match up to $5,000. So I need a motion.
So we had, Drama had come to us asking for a $5,000, up to $5,000 match to fix the lighting and the sound, well, actually, just the lighting. And they received an anonymous donation,
Sorry.
10,000, and they had
Two.
2,000
Yeah.
that they raised, so.
Let's hope they'll have some left over for the sound.
So they raised
Nice.
$12,000.
They raised $12,000.
And we said we'd match up to 5.
That's terrific.
All right.
So it's.
So do I have a motion?
And it is a one-time capital expense.
It's a
I'd like to
one-time
point
capital
out.
It's a
purchase.
one-time capital expense,
Do I have a motion?
and
for
it's
that?
this year's budget anyway.
Yes, this year's operational budget.
I'll make a motion that we honor our pledge to match up to $5,000 in support of the auditorium lighting.
Second.
All those in favor?
I just want to thank whoever came
That's
forward.
wonderful,
Yes.
thank you.
I know they're anonymous, and all those parents that raised that $2,000, that is just fantastic.
So hopefully, we'll get the lights and maybe the sound system.
Maybe there'll be a little left over for the sound so they won't yell at us when we're in.
Can't hear you.
Can't hear you.
Anybody that hasn't been to one of our drama productions, go. It's fabulous. It's done this year, but it was fabulous.
Oh, Ms. Maruda offered to help because he did the sound
Oh,
system
good.
in Westport.
Oh, that would be nice, Jim.
That was a lot of work. I don't think I'm gonna be crawling in any duct work again.
Okay, now
So
the
now
bad
we have
news.
transportation.
Now we're back to transportation. I'll turn it to Doug at this one.
Thanks. Included in the package for the school committee is a memo that our transportation consultant prepared, and it does a pretty good job of summarizing the process that we went through with the other East Bay communities, and it outlines the bids that we tried to solicit from certain transportation contractors, the ones that actually submitted a bid, and then a summary of the 2 that actually bid on our contract at the bottom of the second page. And then it breaks down the increases by category of how we typically pay our bills on the third page. And then the fourth and final page has a recommendation that we award the school transportation contract to First Student, who is our current transportation vendor. And they were the low bid vendor in the process.
Explain to me again why Barrington and Middletown are both going down and the rest of us are all going up.
I think the situation with Barrington is Ocean State has a depot in their town, and they,
Oh.
for some reason, aggressively bid that one. But for the most part, the other
Okay.
districts are pretty much in line with the increases that we're being provided.
Well, except for
as well.
Middletown.
Well, Middletown is with Ocean State.
They're the only one that currently has
So
a
they're
Ocean
currently with them.
Yeah.
So they gave
Oh,
a
okay.
favorable renewal
Yeah,
rate.
because I heard them talking about how favorable it was.
It was.
So their bid to us was higher than First Student, but yet they gave favorable bids to these other communities
Yes.
where they already were,
One that
correct?
they wanted, one that they already have.
Which is what happens when you have a monopoly, pretty much.
A very limited pool of prospective
We have a very
bidders.
limited pool of people to go to. Well, I mean, it's pretty much First Student in Ocean State.
Looks like National Grid.
But we did send bids, and you can see in the packet, 1, 2,
Yeah,
3,
you
4,
sent-
five different transportation
And no one
firms.
else came back?
No.
2 only gave
And
complete
when we
bids.
say we mean the
Right.
district.
Yeah, our hope in hiring a consultant, we
Or the-
knew the environment, by aggressively
collaborative.
pursuing these 10 vendors, we were hoping to get more interest, but you can't force someone to submit a bid. I mean, transportation in general requires a pretty significant capital outlay to start off the bid, and that's why we even increased the term of the contract to 5 years, so hoping that someone would make the investment knowing that the payback would be over 5 years, but ultimately, we ended up with the 2 that pretty much
All right.
operate in Rhode Island.
All right.
So why can they do it cheaper? Because they just like them better?
In reference to which,
Because they can.
I'm not being, you have to ask the representatives to, I guess because they can, not to be flipped, but because they can, or they want to.
And they have an established relationship of some sort? that
Middletown
they're-
has the established relationship. They also have the depot on their property,
Oh.
on school department property. I'm not sure why Barrington got the,
they also have a depot in Barrington
Okay.
that currently wasn't being used in Barrington, so it's a lot less expensive for them to transport kids where the buses already are there. There's not the additional
Oh.
cost of moving it to and from
no,
it.
ours are kept off-site at a private facility.
What would it require for them to keep the buses here? Would that help?
We would need the space to
Have
house.
a
Yeah, it's an
depot.
additional expense for them to potentially rent that and pay, the taxes on the buses because they're residing in a certain town. So it's a significant investment for the vendor. So generally, where they're set up, they try to bid to minimize any additional expenses.
Did we go back and ask them,
Yep.
17% is pretty high, can you justify that?
Yeah, I did actually. I don't know if we're gonna like some of the responses.
Wow.
That's about right. Well, one was, their bus monitors are now unionized. So if you look at the breakdown in the packet, on this page
Yeah,
here.
the largest jump is for the monitors, but they provided me a couple of bullet points. The first
Is
one
that
is
this one, Bill?
Yes.
they're investing over $2 million for the additional buses that are necessary to maintain the age of the buses that we've required in the RFP. Because we.
Say that again?
They have to invest $2 million in additional equipment to comply with the requirements of our RFP. We've required that buses can't exceed a certain age for safety purposes.
You have to get new ones.
So they need to
or used ones
replace
to
a certain
the-
portion of the fleet over the next
Are the
5 years.
communities not requiring that?
We actually released our standard on the age of the buses, again, hoping it would decrease the bid price, but ultimately it didn't, and they're still going to have to pay $2 million in additional bus-related costs to be compliant.
Are the communities using buses from like the 60s or something?
No, not at all. In fact, we were all agreed to meet the same requirements this time, so we're all on the same standard.
Now, who's in this with us?
Yeah, they're summarized on the,
Barrington, Bristol Warren, Portsmouth.
believe the third page.
Us, Little Compton, and Middletown.
That's what kills me. We're all in the same
geographic
collaborative,
area.
but they
Yeah.
increase
think
some
that-
and they don't others,
That's
just
not
because they
right.
can.
I don't like that.
Right, I would think there should be a price based per student per mile that would be the same for every community.
What they would say, and I didn't talk to them, Doug did, but I'm sure the representatives will say, well, each district's unique, and each district has a different rotation on their buses. We may need more buses to be replaced, so we don't have ones from the 60s, running. The issue about the cost for the aids, the bus monitors, we don't have visibility to that. That's what they're telling us. I can't imagine a contract with bus monitors blows up our, that, I don't think they're getting paid that amount of money, is what I'm saying.
Right.
It's
Yeah,
going to the
Actually, that's a
corporate,
good
not to
point,
the
though. We
employees.
do require monitors on the middle
And
school
other
buses.
districts don't.
Because of the fifth graders being
Right.
on that bus, where if it was a 6, 7, 8, the monitor wouldn't need to be on the bus, so maybe that's something.
Well, some
And
districts-
has the General Assembly given relief on that mandate
No.
yet? No.
No, middle school, you have to have them K through 4. And we have them, historically, we've had them, 5 through 8 to maintain the safety.
Well, it's K through 5.
Five. So
This
5
is the
pushes
state
it to-
law.
No, because
So the 5
Portsmouth doesn't
pushes
have them
us.
on 5.
Really?
I think it's K 5.
Because
I'd have
state
to
law is
double
K
check.
through 5.
Yeah,
I don't know about that.
that's, I think, why we're stuck with the middle
Right.
school.
Well, that's why we have them, but other districts, depending on their.
They just ignore
Well,
the
their
mandate?
configuration is K-3 for elementary, but I don't think they have them for their middle school, some of our sister
Wow.
districts.
Because they're ignoring state law then. Interesting.
They may have asked for a waiver.
That, they could have. You're right. You could, yeah.
Another bullet, they've indicated that they've recently organized, and now they're with AFSCME Local 94. Apparently, they were non-union before this contract.
All I know is if gave out a 20% increase, I wouldn't have my job.
Well, and I guess the bottom line is,
20.5.
even if we went out on our own, these are gonna be the same two companies
Yep.
that
Yeah,
bid.
I mean, we
Or
did-
we'd get a higher bid, you know, if we did it again.
We can't, there's no one around it. How about someone in Fall River that'd like to ride our kids around, no?
You know, I mean, we aggressively tried to, even went out and recruit firms, and we
Doug
just
and I-
only got the two bids.
You know,
Oh.
maybe we can get some retired teachers to
'Cause this
bus
isn't,
them around.
Behind the cell van.
Yeah.
that's right. This just isn't right.
Right, 17%, you would think
That's
that,
just-
well, there's a,
And again, our
there's
sister
something for the
district
General
Portsmouth just had the
Assembly.
rest of
Yeah,
the-
see, that's exactly,
I mean,
that's,
that
we
they
were
should not
talking
be
about
allowed
the
to
General Assembly,
increase
they
the-
should not be
I
allowed
talked to
to.
Jay.
It's arbitrary.
I did.
on school
It's arbitrary
transportation.
for them.
I talked to Jay about it.
Did all the other districts that were in this consortium with, is that the right word?
Mhm.
Have they approved these increases?
I believe Portsmouth has.
We're in the process.
Or is
We're
in the
probably
process.
in the middle of the group, because, depending on where the school committee meetings have fallen.
I think Little Compton had their vote, or already voted.
I can't say no one
Will
has
be.
considered, doing anything other than accepting the bid.
No one's approved their budgets yet, let's put it that way, except us. We're the
Well, yeah,
first
that's
one.
because we're so
We're
early in
so
the
early.
process.
Everyone else is still dealing with that.
I just, we don't really have a choice, I don't see.
don't.
What's our choice?
Now, we've been operating with the same routes, and we've revisited them numerous times to see if we could get any more efficiencies out of
And
it.
to have our own fleet is just,
And because we're so big,
cost
that's another
prohibitive.
reason for the cost, because geographically,
Right.
This is large.
A lot of
you know, it's a
miles,
larger
yeah.
distance than, let's say, Barrington, and so it all adds up to that. But I agree, I think the solution, the long-term solution is hopefully, and I'm not for regulation, but this is something that maybe the General Assembly can look at.
or
because
weren't they, wasn't
it's
RIDE
crazy.
looking
were
at
looking
doing
at-
a state
Yeah, but they
level?
have trouble,
Yeah.
they've had trouble maintaining the special ed.
They did take over sped
Buses.
transportation
And they're not
with
doing
an
a good
eye
job
on
of
looking
They
at
gave them
regular
so
ed.
much fits to make it work. They won't
It very
expand
is, it
beyond.
really is very complicated. They've hired transportation specialists at RIDE, which we actually used last bid, and that's how we became aware of the consultant, and it still didn't work to our advantage this time.
So Representative Edwards wants you to send him all this information, okay, so we can look at
Send
it.
them this explains it.
Can we get together with the other districts and come up with a counteroffer? Do they walk away from the whole book of business?
Well, Barrington and Middletown are already gonna
Right,
They
do,
had the leverage redone.
they're already gonna
Yeah.
do Ocean State.
They already approved it. Middletown did. They were very happy
Well, because
with
they,
it.
there's when,
Oh,
there's
they
a
I've
were.
got
low.
to prove it to
They
them.
were thrilled with it.
They think, they've quoted that their bid is much more reasonable than the other bid, and they're kind of at that number, and they weren't really willing to further negotiate
So it would
that.
just be us, Little Compton and Bristol Warren,
I
and
don't
Bristol
think they'd
Warren's
be-
having all kinds of issues right now.
Unfortunately, I don't think we'd save anything if we told them, we're not accepting your proposal, and we'll go out to bid again.
Especially now that the environment's become clear,
Because the
there's not a
only
lot of
alternative
competition.
is Ocean State, and they've already told us,
We're
you know,
coming
through
in
their bid
higher.
process, what it would be. It's more than what First Student had, and that's assuming they'd even bid on it. I mean, and we're also, running out of time to get a bus company up.
So we heard about the monitors. Where else does the 17% come from? $1 million in buses.
The buses, well, they're building it in, if you look on that chart, they're building those increases of 16.6, 13.2, and 24%. And again, I haven't seen it, Doug's dealt with this, but I'm pretty sure that's where that 2 million comes in, because you're paying for the buses there. Now, these other things, and with special ed also, the other item, and then you have your monitors,
They've broken out by line item where the increases are, so the ones we use the most, fortunately, are the lowest increase, but you see late buses up 24, the sped wheel was about, a little up below average at 13, and then the bus monitors aids is up most significantly, and I believe that's because of the recent unionization.
Well, too, we need to keep an eye on this because those programs where we've told them they're responsible for busing, we better let them know they're gonna have a 70%
Yeah.
increase.
Yeah.
Those activities,
Right, that pay for
athletic
them, yeah.
activities that they pay for their own busing,
Absolutely, that's
it's
a good
going
point.
up.
Yeah.
Wow. All right.
good news.
No, you guys really.
How many days a week do we have late buses at the middle school?
One?
No,
3,
How many?
he said.
Three.
How many late, 3 late
Tuesday,
buses?
Wednesday, Thursday. And that's just at the middle school.
And how about the high school?
None.
No,
None.
None,
we
right?
don't do that.
And we've never had them at the elementary schools.
No.
No.
Years ago, we had it at both,
Yeah,
the high school.
we used to have it. Okay, so
That's what we
is there a
said.
motion after the sad news? I don't want to vote for it, I think they're terrible,
I know.
what they're doing to our budget.
Glad you guys did your evaluation before this stuff.
Well, do I have a motion? I guess we're stuck.
Oh, goodness.
Mr. Fiore, we stuck?
Yeah, unfortunately, I've tried to pull any rabbit left in the hat, and I just don't have any left for this one.
All right.
Okay, thank you.
So moved.
Thank you for trying. Do I have a second?
Second,
Okay,
we need buses.
all those in favor?
With regret.
Not voting, Mrs. Black, or
Sally,
no?
you voting no? Are
You're
you
voting no buses
abstaining?
for our
I'm voting no
students?
buses.
No buses for students. They can
Just-
walk next
It's
year.
just that, you know, it's going to pass, it's just to let them know that we don't appreciate this.
It's a.
It passed, don't worry, don't worry, the poor principal's having a stroke over there. The kids aren't going to get picked up.
No buses? Parents will now, that'll be our fee increase. Parents
Oh,
will
there
now
we go.
be,
There we go. We could
We
say
can't do that.
some of those other.
parents will now be responsible for busing their children.
I do think we're required to provide busing to our
We are,
students.
We do, and a seat for every kid, even if they don't take it.
I can't believe it.
even those who are in private schools.
Point, one of the things I was thinking about this afternoon and forgot to bring up. So is there a mandate that we, I mean, you could sort of say, we were not able to get a bus contract at a 0.6% increase, therefore we're not going to have buses this year?
No, I think there's
No,
no,
you
we
have
have
to
to.
give them-
Yeah, no,
There's
I-
guidelines
that-
where you have
You
to.
That's
have
one
to
of the
give them
mandates
right.
that is unavoidable.
You have to provide transportation not only for our students, but for private students.
Yes.
Yeah,
private
that's
schools.
right, no, it is good.
Between that and the school
Just to
lunch,
keep
it's been an
saying it,
expensive
but-
day.
Yep, okay, so we did that, and now we have the appointment to the
Well, the good
technology,
news, this doesn't cost money.
technology committee, the
I
appointment,
move that we appoint Mr. Ruda.
and I second that.
All in favor?
All in
Certainly
favor?
ask Mr. Wu.
Thank you, Jim.
Just as a courtesy.
Nope,
He
he voted for
You're the new
it.
He
guy,
voted
Mr.
for
Wu.
it, he's
You're
a
welcome
new
to
guy.
the
Al, you happy?
He could have voted no.
You happy, Al?
Yeah, Al, it's not gonna cost us anything.
And here's a request to sell obsolete equipment.
Yes, I gave you a list of obsolete equipment that Mr. Mendes has compiled in per policy 315. The last time we did one of these yard sales, it was really for when we had the,
Ranger, right?
when we were going to the new schools.
And where do the funds go?
They would, wherever you want, we'd put them back.
Could go into
We'd
our
like to
deficit
put it in-
reduction fund for.
Right now?
Yeah, I mean, again, I don't think it's gonna be that great, but before
One
we,
potato peeler.
you know,
Can we buy
we'll
a computer
advertise
with
it, we'll make it known as best we can.
So we don't let him offset, it just goes back into our reserves?
Right,
Okay.
so whatever we make, we put into our reserves.
All right.
Whatever's not sold, we then sell for scrap, and then those funds come back to us.
Do you think we'll make 500,000?
I'd go.
Yeah.
Can we buy a
I'm lucky to
computer?
make $500.
Right, that's what I was
Yeah.
thinking,
Yes.
500.
Sure.
I'm always curious as to why the Picasset wheelchair lift for the stage is still stored at the middle school. Does that happen to be on that list?
Let me see.
I don't think so.
I'm
didn't
not
see
sure
it.
that we have
I
any
don't
use
see it.
for it, and we
We
should
can-
make some cash off of it.
Okay, we can add to that.
Add it, thank you.
It is
Lift.
located in the supply closet across from Tiger Cubs.
Thank you, Kelly.
Okay,
Thank you,
It's in
Ken.
and if we could I, yeah, okay, we'll put that to.
Because don't we have one here that we use, or what, does it use?
It was old Picasset.
No, it's
It
the
was-
old Picasset to get
it
to the
was
stage.
It was a
We spent a lot of
wheelchair
money on it at the
elevator.
Yeah, we
time.
did.
I'm sure we did,
We
but
did.
there's
Because
no
the stage was
sense,
like-
Nowhere else that we.
there's no
No.
sense for it to be sitting
No,
there.
because all the elementaries were built to code.
There are also some old
You have to
basketball
install
hoops
it.
and nets.
What
It's-
about the high schools?
It's
How do they get up
It's
to?
a big deal. You'd have to build it into the stage.
Gotcha,
And then
okay.
they lift the people
I just want to
up.
make sure we can't use it anymore.
No.
Yeah.
In that same closet are also backboards and rims from, I believe, Old Picasset Gym as well.
You should be able
Picasso.
Check out that
Don't
supply
touch my
closet.
Tiverton Junior basketball stuff, but you can take
You
it.
better
Okay.
label it.
Thank you.
I know, I better go label my stuff. Don't take the Pepsi cooler, that's fine.
Okay, so do I have a vote for that? Do we vote for the obsolete
I'll
material?
make a motion to sell obsolete equipment as amended.
Second.
All those in favor?
You don't think the potato peeler will draw some money?
Really, you have a potato
I have
peeler?
no, it could be an industrial strength.
It is, yeah.
Does 5 pounds in the middle.
I don't know if it's a Dyson slice from Ronco or it says potato.
That's still essential piece of
Yeah.
Potato peelers sitting there.
Okay, the next thing I have on there is the waive, and it's just the books I passed out from the governor.
Thank you.
And the first thing is her workforce, so that's to do with the schools.
I haven't seen it yet, but is there money mentioned in this?
It's
nice
right
little
there in
Shiny
the-
packet?
That's good, though, to encourage that. And Chris Simonelli wrote about it in the paper, and that's our Newport County mentor that we belong to. So he mentioned the waive in it, and you can take those home and look at them. We'll support the governor, so she'll support us. Thank you.
Just under announcements, tomorrow night, 6 PM, awards night here at the high school.
Oh, that's right.
And the invitations went out today. You should all be receiving them to graduation on June 5th at 6 PM. Everyone's cordially invited to our night in the gymnasium.
Anybody else?
Anybody else have any announcements? Don't forget, next meeting's going to be Spotlight on Success. Everybody, please come. It's going to be fabulous.
So do we need executive?
Yes?
Yes,
Amy has something.
Amy has
Something.
something.
Just like one brief announcement, each of the schools is definitely hosting a wellness event for all of our staff, and there's incentives for staff members to participate. So that was an outcome of the Health and Wellness.
Yes, that was good.
Sponsored by Blue Cross Blue Shield as well as the Trust. So those are free biometric health screenings for all staff, and there's some.
And school committee members.
I think you get a potato peeler.
No, you get a piece of
You
gift
get a
card
free
to
potato
participate
peeler.
from the Trust, of course, as
Limited
part
offer.
of our wellness program.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you. Thank you, Amy, for getting them in on us. Go for it. Carol?
All right, I'd like to make a motion to go into executive session to discuss Council 94 negotiations, SS 42-46-582, NEA negotiations, SS 42-46-582, and Superintendent's evaluation, SS 42-46-5A1.
Wouldn't be Tuesday.
It wouldn't be Tuesday if
All
my
those in favor?
evaluation
Yes,
wasn't on
yes,
the
yes, yes, yes.